Uh, our esteemed alumni expert today is Anthony Mao, co-owner of Kupu Place, LLC, a sustainable urban farm in Honolulu, and also the diversified agriculture manager at Kualoa Ranch, Hawaii. Anthony, let's see here. Anthony is a graduate of CTAHR's Molecular Biosciences and Bioengineering doctoral program. I went ahead and sent Anthony the questions that many of you sent in with your registration forms. So he'll be starting off with those, but please feel free to add any other questions you might have in the chat, and we'll open it up for everybody to discuss on camera later if you like. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Anthony. Take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Jess, for having me. Thanks, everybody. Super excited to talk to you guys about aquaponics and more or less commercial aquaponics. And before we start, I basically just have a simple PowerPoint that I'm going to share with you all, and it'll just have some images, and I can go over some of the things that are in those images, and then follow up with the actual Q&A. To brief you some more on my background, I am a 2019 graduate from MBBE. I did my studies in aquaculture, and I focused on developing technology to farm raise opihi. So that's why I'm wearing this guy. So if you're familiar, they're marine limpets. I did a lot of life history work on them. I did design, build, and test spawning and larval rearing in captivity, in aquaculture systems. And so, along the lines of today, it's basically me giving you guys a little intel on small scale aquaponics, but also aquaculture and any of the related questions that you might have. Before I got into aquaculture, I also was very much into marine science. So I ended up going to school in the University of San Diego, focusing on marine science, marine ecology. I even did a minor in environmental studies and biology as well. So I did a lot because I wasn't sure where I was going to end up. I eventually made it back home after working in the aquaculture industry for a couple of years. I did a lot of work on finfish at first. So, the yellowtails, the white sea basses, the striped basses, even yellowfin, ahi. I also got my hands later on down the line in a lot of invertebrate aquaculture. So started in finfish and transitioned over to invertebrates, mostly marine to start. And so what it was is just the application of my undergraduate studies to an industry, and I gravitated towards that. At home, it was the invertebrates. It started with sea urchins, and then it went into OPE for graduate school. And then I ended up at Kualoa, where I do pond culture of Pacific white shrimp. So those have been my latest invertebrates that I've been working on. A lot of the training that I have is in education. It's in an academic setting, but lately it's been hyper focused in the commercialization and development, even at Kupu Place in aquaponics, to try to feed people and to work on food production for food insecurities. And we all know very well that the current climate in our society is that we're short on food. We have a lot of people that need to be fed, and the more we look at technologies that are highly productive and efficient, and those are a lot of what you see in aquaculture and aquaponics, the better we can do to offset some of our societal issues, and eventually work our way towards in Hawaii being, maybe 50% sustainable with food production being on island. So as a whole, I guess for me, the diversification from marine aquaculture to also doing finfish and invertebrates, and then now doing a lot of freshwater aquaculture, aquaponics. Um, that those transitions were natural because of where I was in the world at the time when I was doing them, and then now have actually put me in a position where diversified agriculture and aquaculture is kind of my forte, and applying it to a commercial setting. So that's me in a nutshell. I like to surf and I like to have fun. I I enjoy helping people. So part of this whole experience right now is for me to give back to the community, or one of the communities that got me to where I am. I will do a screen share, Jess, of the PowerPoint. Let's see. Can you guys see everything? All right. Is that good? Jess?
I can see it. So I'm hoping everybody else can as well. Just let us know in the chat if you don't see a slide.
Okay. So, doing aquaculture, doing aquaponics in Hawaii is a challenge because we have uh, expensive real estate. Access to coastal waters is even difficult, especially when you consider marine aquaculture being at the forefront of what people consider to be aquaculture in the world. The number one species produced in the world is Pacific white shrimp. We do it at Kualoa, but we're at a very, very small scale. So knowing that, these marine waterways, although we're surrounded by water, the permitting and the accessibility of these particular areas is difficult. So getting to that, I guess, access point for young farmers, startup companies, the next generation of aquaculturalists is, you have to consider these things and you have to be flexible to be able to produce and have fun. So the Nile tilapia was what you just saw, and that's one of the predominant species in Hawaii that's used in aquaponics. This is a picture of Kupu Place and our lettuce beds. So for those that aren't aware of what aquaponics is, I'm sure most of you guys are, because you asked requested to be a part of this Q&A. But if you are not super familiar with aquaponics, it's essentially taking hydroponic grow beds and supplying the fertilizer from fish waste. And so in this picture here, you can kind of see, two cycles of lettuce in the same bed. And we do well at Kupu Place to grow the maximum amount of vegetables we can in a very small space. And that's one of the advantages of growing in water and in aquaculture systems. And more to that point, we have different age lettuces to keep our cycles going. And we have a nursery and a grow out phase. This picture is just, your classic water quality. It's something that's really important when you go and do aquaponics and aquaculture. This particular kit is a hatch kit. I use it, and I sourced this from Pentair. I know there's questions about where to source materials, but Pentair has a wide selection of aquaculture and aquaponics gear that you would need. So this is a kit system that has titration methods, and it's, if you want to feel sciencey, which not everyone wants to do that, but I notice people in aquaculture science minded. So if you're into that, then definitely check these kits out. They're game changing from a sense that they're very affordable. and they just take a lot of time. So if you weigh out, if you want to spend more money on the front end, buy probes, sensors that give you faster reading, more consistent reading, then maybe you wouldn't want this kit system because those save you a ton of time. But at a small scale, hobbyist level in the backyard, you're going to consider these kits at like $300 and it'll run you for the whole year. Is a good example of one of the products that we put out at Kupu Place. It's a bag of lettuce. We market it as a premium bag of aquaponic lettuce. So with aquaponics and hydroponics, you have the advantage on the marketplace for having clean produce. And by food safety regulations, as long as your water isn't touching your plants and you're harvesting it clean from the water, or from without having the water touch your plants, then it's seen as a clean product. So you technically don't have to wash it. But we always encourage washing vegetables. Here's another picture of aquaponics system at Kupu Place. So more about, Kupu Place. We designed our system to be flow through. We do a hybrid of coupled and decoupled aquaponics, which we can go into in the Q&A if you guys are interested in learning the differences. And you can see how productive that is. That was a 90-pound lettuce harvest on the left, just from a 40-foot grow bed. And it kind of speaks to like just how much you can pump out of these systems. And of course, I like the picture because it's a little bit of candy cane action for Christmas. But these are what are called deep water culture raft aquaponic systems. In my own theory, I actually shortened up the bed depth from what is typically over 8 inches of depth in the grow bed to be 4 inches. And my theory was that, if we're delivering nutrient dense water and the right environment to these plants, that the roots don't need to search for and grow as long to be able to suck up water and nutrients as they would in ground. So really, you can grow them in shallower depths. And sure enough, we do really well. And there are pros and cons to having done what I did, but I call this the shallow water culture. Next picture is just shiso. Yeah, we have shiso microgreens. So one of the products that we diversified with was a set of microgreens, and you can grow these aquaponically if you have a bottom watering system, which we don't. More for logistics of where we are and working with budget constraints at the time when we set up our microgreen stations. But the new age farmer is doing these things indoors, LED lights, bottom watering systems, super automated. They essentially don't need nutrients, but you can add nutrients and so it could be synthetic through hydroponics, or if you add the fish waste, it would be aquaponics. This is another product, and it's something that's pretty hot with the restaurants. So not so related to aquaculture at the moment, but these also can be done in different systems. One of the systems that it can be done quite well is a NFT gutter system. So an NFT system is nutrient film technique. Essentially it's just with holes in it, and water dribbles through on the bottom surface layer of the gutter, so it passes through all the plants. And one of the reasons that that's such a popular style of hydroponics is because of the startup costs being lower and the maintenance being fairly easy. But there are limitations to that system as well, which if you want to learn more, you can ask the questions later. So this is a system I recently built. it was an experimental system that I used as more or less a project for Hill high school interns at Cool Ranch. This system's really neat because I worked with an engineer that worked for various companies in Hawaii who was interested in aquaponics, but he did a lot of fluid dynamic work. And we took what was like the basic premise of and underlying engineering principles of an airlift system, and we're able to put together a really efficient airlift system that takes the water from the bottom left of the picture. You can kind of see the slug chamber. From there, the lowest point, all the way up 4 feet into the grow bed. We get 5 gallons a minute flow. It's fairly consistent flow and more than you would need for any aquaponics system like this. And the cool part about it is, especially when you think about how we're gonna feed people and consider labor constraints in agriculture. One of those things is having systems that work super efficient, and that is considered of energy too, labor and energy. So we're running this entire system off of one 25-watt air pump. And you're probably asking questions already in your head, like how that's possible. But essentially, it's functioning off of a timer system, which I'm a big fan of, and so our electricity is cut into thirds because in actuality, our air pump's only on 1/3 of the day. And again, we're only using one 25-watt air pump, no water pumps. And we plumbed it from underneath a shed that was about 50, well, actually 100 feet away. I used about 10 lengths of 10-foot PVC pipe, which comes at the entrance of this picture at the bottom. And that feeds all of the system. On the right, it feeds the fish tank. On the left, it feeds the air pump or the airlift. And then we also have drop-down airlines so we can do decoupled aquaponics and do a bioreactor underneath there. And we're doing it right now, and we're gonna actually use that waste to put into a Venturi jet system, which will feed our in-ground soil plots. And I think that's kind of the future of aquaponics. Oh, and then sorry, to go back here, this is a different system than our place where I was talking about having a flow through water culture. Well, this is actually a gravel system. And then here's another picture of lettuce, head lettuce, another type of edible flower that are quite popular. Here's a shot of our seedling system, and everybody has their own way of doing the nursery phase, where you're taking seedlings in a higher density and propagating your lettuce varieties, or if you want to do kale or spinach or other types of greens, you're going to do it in a higher density. And the starter material, the media, can vary quite drastically between growers. So we can go over those. This is an Oasis cube. We're growing in what are their thin cut, medium sized 1-inch cubes, and we get the highest density and biggest bang for our buck using these more economy style Oasis cubes. And then we have another timer system, ebb and flow, sort of fill up and drain aquaponics here. So you'll see the extruded clay. And that's the extruded clay is one of the medias you can fill a gravel system with, along the lines of what volcanic material would be like, volcanic rock. So that's, I believe, it. Oh yeah, and then we don't just grow green leaf lettuce, although we like to grow green leaf lettuce. We also do butter. We've done romaine. We do now what's called one cut lettuce. and they're all valued differently by the consumer. So I'm gonna open it up to Q&A. Jess, I don't know how you would do this. I'm gonna keep my, well, I guess I'll just share again when I have reason to share the slides.
Okay. So Kiana had a question, and was actually one of the questions I had as well. Is aquaponic grown produce more or less susceptible to diseases such as rat lungworm?
So they're definitely less susceptible, and it's something that I guess in the world of science and food safety, which is backed by science, you'd want to substantiate that claim. But purely based on the fact that you can eliminate snails, and it's harder for snails to actually get into beds that are 4 feet above ground, it's pretty safe to say that there's a drastic reduction in the likelihood of the rat lungworm disease from coming about, verm and these slugs and snails. We do from time to time see snails and slugs make the trek up. But the cool part about it is that, if you're farming in your system for X amount of time, over time, you can physically remove a lot of the pests that would bring about that disease from around the base of or the footings of your system. So control by physical removal is a lot easier. And that honestly is the safest way because, we talk about pest control, use of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, things like that bring down the marketability of your crop. And so with these systems, we can market it as all of the above, being like free of everything except good nutrients and, of course, excellent tasting lettuce. Good question.
Awesome. There was also a lot of questions that came in about where do home gardeners get most of their aquaponics supplies, and are there any good resources with parts lists and instructions that people could use?
Yeah. So the aquaponics suppliers on island are limited, but there's of course I'm gonna refer you guys to Travis at Waimanalo Aquaponic Place. So that's in the heart of Waimanalo. You can go out there. They have all the home buyer materials that you guys would need, and that's spanning from products for the build out and then moving towards keeping animals alive. And the feed store is right next door, so that's great. So that's a 2-for-1 trip for you if you want to go grab your tank, your pumps, your filter media, your grow bed media, and you can get the food next door. He also, is a good person to talk to besides someone like myself because he's seen a lot of different people walk in, and whenever you have some space like that, you're going to have a lot of exchange of words. And he's probably seen more aquaponic systems than I have being an owner of that shop. So definitely check out Travis out at Waimanalo Aquaponic Place. And then the second shop locally on Oahu is this spot in Nimitz. It's a hydroponic and garden growing company, and they have a bunch of locations, and they are bigger than I'm sounding like they are. I just learned about them though, and I started picking up odd and end things. They're geared towards supporting hydroponics. So if you are interested in soluble fertilizers, so that's liquid or granular, or if you need anything for irrigation, they have everything there. Their staff is I think good enough for the home buyer to get what they need, but they're less about systems. So yes, they do have odd and end like LED systems. They have the odd and end hydroponic grow trays that are prefabricated, but they're not gonna have all these different size tanks for aquaponics. So two different styles of shops, but both important for anybody who's wanting to start.
And what was the name of that company?
I This is a fail. I don't know the exact name, and they're not quite we're not quite on first name basis. So yeah, I didn't have I didn't plug them in like I am doing for Travis, but they're on Nimitz, and it's a quick Google search for their name if you want to type in like hydroponic supplier.
Maybe Ohana Greenhouses and
There you
Garden
go.
Supply.
Yep, there you go. That's it.
Oh, yay!
Yeah,
I'll put their info in the.
cool. Oh yeah, and I did want to say I do have a aquaponics guidebook that I produced for Coolo Ranch, but really just for me to use when I'm teaching people. And it goes over, system parameters, and water quality testing ranges that you need to be aware of. Simple like the nitrogen cycle and how when you start up the whole system, like how long it takes to go from starting it to getting a mature system that has nitrates at the levels that you need it to be at. So I have that available. I couldn't get it. I'm on vacation right now, so I didn't have access to my Kula account, which I apologize. But I can send that in a follow-up email to you, Jess, and then maybe you can forward it to people who are interested in receiving that.
Yeah, that would be great. I will send an email out following this, and then I'll see if anybody's interested in it, and I will get that to them. Thanks.
Great.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's like we have lots of questions.
Yeah.
Um,
Fire 'em off.
so it says it seems like most people use tilapia in their aquaponic systems. Are there any other fish species you would recommend for here in Hawaii?
That's a pretty common question, and what I'll say is that there's been a lot of experimentation with prawns being freshwater. Um, and more recently, shrimp, which are euryhaline. So any species that's euryhaline is going to be able to cope with low salinities, and honestly, it like low as in 1 to 3 parts per thousand, which on the scale of fresh to marine, that's like virtually fresh water. But it takes a lot of acclimation. So I've talked with Maria Haas at University of Hawaii, Hilo, and they're working on culturing a lot of different species. And one of the hot species that I'm really interested in, and I know some folks in the windward side are a hole hole, and we know that they can handle freshwater systems, but producing them is another venture for aquaculture industry as a whole, and nobody's really producing them except they have a project where they are starting to produce some eggs, and it looks like there might be viable offspring in the near future. And so their whole intention is to get to the point where they can seed these backyard farmers that aren't going to go out and source tens and thousands of fingerlings, but just need maybe like 20 fish for their backyard system, and why not use a native fish? So that's something that's cool on the radar. I know paku is a fish that is available on Oahu, and I don't know where else. Catfish, of course, and any of these, most of them are not, they're introduced species. So when I talk about it, I'm not as excited, but it's the reality of living in Hawaii and doing freshwater production here. A lot of native species are tough to grow and are considered less hardy than tilapia. Tilapia is a good one because you can really maximize the growth of your hydroponic bed, which is the focus and not the opposite way around. If you're focused on aquaculture and you're trying to produce meat, I think aquaponics is not the way to go. when you really balance out your system. And this is something that my guidebook has. It's looking at the biomass of the fish relative to supporting enough plants. If you were to try to produce fish, I think most farmers that are experienced in that would tell you need a lot of space to produce anything that's worth doing as a business. So right now, tilapia is king, and there are so many different types of tilapia. But if you're interested, we use a hybrid of blue Nile and the Mozambique tilapia, which gives us a pretty fast growing fish from the Nile. But unlike the pure Niles, you get that sort of euryhaline, but better performance in freshwater. So yeah, that's it.
Cool. That's awesome to know that there's a native out there though that they're.
Yeah, it's a prospect.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Sure.
Another question was like, I guess if you're going to do an aquaponic system, can food for the fish be grown and made at home? Like to like, I guess, make a fully sustainable system. Like, can you actually
Yeah.
like grow something to feed the
Totally.
fish?
Um, sorry, ask that question one more time. Sorry, I
Oh,
had some.
no, is it possible to grow food like for your fish to feed them, you know, that are going to be in your aquaponic system, or is that something that you always just have to go out and purchase?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of doing that. From the sense that to get performance out of your animals, just like you and I would require being fed a very wholesome diet. Um, if you grow up on canned foods and don't get enough calories in your body, you're not going to feel too good. So it's the same thing with fish, and you can virtually feed tilapia anything, bread, um, different waste products. Like I've heard of crazy things being dumped into fish tanks and them eating them, but is that the right thing to do? If you don't care about your fish and you're thinking more sustainability from things going bad, then great. But fish are like humans in a sense that the gut tract and everything is similar, and indigestion does occur. And if you start to mess with your fish that have the biggest role in supporting your system, then I think you lose out. So I would definitely recommend buying some pellets. And I know um, CTSA, the Center for Tropical and Subtropical Aquaculture, HPU, and all the folks that are looking at ways we can improve sustainability from the feeds consumption standpoint. And they're working on developing feeds in Hawaii and using the feed mills that are kind of idle right now. And it's unfortunate that they're idle. There's a little bit of politics involved with that, but eventually we're looking at a future with feed being produced for tilapia or whatever the common finfish are, using alternative feedstuffs. So alternative feedstuffs might be like if we had a moringa farm, moringa meal or cassava meal or papaya scraps, fish scraps. Instead of using fish scraps that are even imported, it doesn't mean we can't use fish meal at all. There's a bad rap for that as far as sustainability, but maybe using fish scraps from a local waste converter. So those are on the radar, and those are the, I guess, things to look forward to for us in the industry and improving our sustainability.
Great. Someone is asking, okay, so she says she's a Hoya plant fan and heard recently that aquaponics work well for Hoyas. So I tried using LECA, she says. It works great for root development, but wondering what nutritional needs I need for prolific plant growth. Do you know anything about?
So Hoya, from what I know about them, they don't like being overwatered. So that's a very interesting thing. I don't know a lot about producing them because I've actually never produced them. And if it does well in aquaponics, then that's kind of new to me and kind of cool because I know that again, overwatering is something that you just can't do. That's why they can thrive indoors. They don't like a lot of light, so yeah, that's just a hard question to answer. Nutritionally, you would need to do some testing. You need to, sample your water before, sample your water after a extended period of time to know what the consumption rates are. And when I say testing your water, it's testing, what are your phosphorus levels, what are your iron levels, what are your nitrate levels, things like that. So, um, if you wanted to, there are people in this talk that I see on here from CTAHR. Maybe we can put you in touch with them. We can do some analysis at UH if that's something on a commercial level that you're interested in doing. Otherwise, I am hesitant to give further advice on Hoya.
Okay. Oh, tips to grow cilantro using aquaponics systems for home.
Yeah, so stick to one seed per starter. If you have really low germination, you could do a couple seeds per starter and thin them out. And they do well in, the raft systems that we have at Kupu behind me. And we also know they do well in gravel systems. They're pretty simple herb. They grow similar to any of the other leafy greens that you would want to grow from a system standpoint. They're pretty light heads. So, I've never grown a cilantro bunch heavier than quarter pound. So again, you can grow them in all sorts of systems where, some systems lend towards growing things that are going to be top heavy and it can support them, and other systems are not. So gravel systems are typically used if you need to really support the plant and at depth. And then the raft systems are for lighter plants. And then NFT is, again, it's kind of touch and go depending on what your experiences are, but I've seen a mix of different stuff. So are we having tacos tonight? Is that what's going on?
What happened?
Are we having tacos tonight?
Yes, how do you know? Oh my god.
That'd be great.
So most everybody wants to know people don't know much, like what are some of the schematics to build the tank, water and pump systems with PVC piping. So like what are the different components of a simple system that you would need?
Yeah, that's also in my guidebook. So I definitely want to get you guys that guidebook. I feel like a lot of these questions are going to be answered in that guidebook. But the short is that you need to have something that moves water, and that's your pump. Fresh, fresh or salt water, you're going to need the same. It's a water pump. You can start with, for most systems, from a backyard to a small commercial system, you could use a magnetic drive pump. Those are pretty cheap and last for a good amount of years. At Kupu Place, we use the same one since day one, and it's been over 3 years. No signs of wearing out. If we can get 6 years out of it, I'll be stoked. And then that's for what, so you'll need a pump to move water. You'll need a pump to move uh, air into the system, and you can achieve that through a ton of different ways. So I was explaining to the people that I was teaching from Hill that you can use a water pump for a system to not only move water to different parts of your system, but you can also use it to diffuse air into your system so that you could use just one water pump to run your entire system, which is opposite from what I said before, which is that we were using a single air pump to run an entire system. More traditionally, you would have a water pump and an air pump to do those respective things. And then you obviously need to map out your direction of flow. So on paper, I always like to do diagrams at first when I sketch up a system. And you're typically going to go from a place of, the lowest point, which would be your sump, where you draw your water from. Everything gravity flows down to, that sump. So your sump tank, you have your pump connected, it pumps water up, and then you're going to go into your fish tank. And then from the fish, it goes into the filter, and the filter is a huge part of this whole process, and something that I think there was a question on filtration. And filtration is another part of the system that actually is single-handedly the most important as far as getting your nutrient conversion. So, you don't just magically get nitrate from having fish poop. That ammonia has to get broken down to nitrite to nitrate through two steps, two different bacterial species or bacterium. And that happens when you have an area with a large surface area. So we use what's called a biological filter, and biological filters, they also can trap as a physical separator or mechanical filter, but biological filters often look like maybe a bag of bio balls, if you've ever heard of those, plastic beads, sand, and in some homes, actually a lot of home systems, folks are designing their aquaponics system to rely on the gravel itself as a biofilter. So biofilter is important. Physical separation is the second most important thing in your entire system. And it's something that a lot of commercial growers even overlook. So physical separation, removal of the fish waste away from your grow beds, away from even your fish tank, makes for your oxygen levels to be more stable and often to be higher than if you just let your waste go everywhere. And then from a food safety standpoint, it also is important because you don't want, when you pull up your rafts, to know that, fish waste is getting all over your plants. So compartmentalizing the waste is huge. And, so you need a filter for that. And after that, the water is going to go into your hydroponic beds. Now you can do it in a loop, and on your diagram, you can do it one into the other and just go in a full circle. And that's called coupled aquaponics. And that is the most popular by aquaculture traditionalists that, usually design aquaculture systems that way. But one of the limitations with that system is that you have your oxygen breakdown in the entirety of that system. So it's just a consideration where as waste breaks down, it's an aerobic digestion that occurs in your filter, meaning that the bacteria are consuming the oxygen out of the system. So the more waste you have going and it's circulating the same water, the lower your oxygen is going to be. And oxygen is the number one parameter that really gets people. And what you can do is you can split your water flow from the filter. So that's what I do is I split it and I go from the sump. Actually, instead of going from the sump into the fish tank, I go the sump into the filter. And from the filter, I split it out from the outflow going into the fish tank. So the fish get filtered water and the grow beds all get filtered water. So everything is filtered before it enters the fish and the grow beds. So virtually everything's filtered every single time that things circulate. And you can do what's called decoupled aquaponics. I encourage you guys to kind of look that up because that is the frontier of aquaponics, and it's something that I am designing a lot of my new systems off of. So those are the main components: pumps, sump tank, fish tank, filters, and the grow beds. And you can, sketch it up however you like. You can interchange. If you're tight on space, you might use a certain pump. If you're growing on a large scale, you might use a certain pump. You might do coupled or decoupled aquaponics depending on how efficient you want your system and your know-how of building these systems.
Awesome. Another question about the fish food. So so depending on what type of feed you give your fish, is that that's going to affect the outcome of the waste and the growth of your plants?
Yeah. So again, in the guidebook that hopefully you guys will receive after this, I go over calculations to figure out how much ammonia nitrate you need in your system and how much you need to scrub from and how large your biofilter needs to be. And in turn, if your water volume reaches a certain level ppm of nitrate, you should be able to sustain plants. And then from there, you kind of would just grow as many plants as you can until your nitrate's lower, and you can respond by adding more fish, or you can take out and reduce the amount of plants. So yeah, sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, no, I think you answered it. Just the different types of food that you feed the fish.
Yeah. So sorry, I had to circle back. So all that said, calculating the amount of ammonia nitrate actually considers basically how much crude protein is in your feed. So the percentage of nitrogen essentially from protein levels of your feed is going to be super important. And you want to pay attention. So if you're going to skimp on, like I was talking about performance, so if you're going to skimp and feed your tilapia breadcrumbs, you're going to get crummy lettuce. You're going to get crummy production. But if you do really spend the time to buy a good quality feed, and the standard is about 40% protein, but in the industry, folks have reported going from a 40% protein from the same manufacturer to a 32% protein, which is cheaper on the shelf. They are seeing differences in production. So that 8% difference in nitrogen or protein, which eventually breaks down into your nitrogen source fertilizer, makes a huge difference as far as what you see in the plant growth.
Oops. Great. Does anybody else have any questions for Anthony? Dr. Kobayashi or no? Okay. Well, do you have anything else to add, Anthony? Or
Well, I actually kind of want to take a survey. So I was curious to know how many of you folks are considering doing aquaponics, whether it's hobby level or small scale commercial, or want to work for somebody that already has an aquaponics system like myself.
No.
Maybe if you type it in the chat, I don't know. But it's the reason I ask is because Kupu Place is trying to expand on aquaponic production, and we're looking at going onto a larger farm, which would take our 1/64 of an acre system to a 1 acre system, which by volume is massive. And there seems to be a lot of interest in vertical farming, and there's so many offshoot types of system-based growing that in controlled agriculture that is the future. And so if you have a background in this stuff, I think there's a future to work for large companies. And unlike other agriculture, soil-based agriculture companies, these more biotech types of entities, I think, are a little bit more lucrative, not just because of the price points that you're getting for the crops, but from a sense that sustainability in the industry is huge. And if you burn out because you're tired working every day, 40 hours a week in the sun, in soil, that's a huge factor as far as wanting to stay in the industry. And if we can keep people, I know in graduate school is the same thing. The main thing is so that to keep students from burning out. And if you have a type of agriculture that you're not getting burnout, that's huge for food production and sustainability. And there's so many ways that aquaponics has been moved into Hawaii and infiltrated into the way that we sustain ourselves. So Waimanalo has a huge grant that I don't know if they're wrapped up with it, but in the Homestead area, all those families have an aquaponics system in their backyard. Every high school group that I've ever talked to in Hawaii public schools has done or wants to do aquaponics. And all the money that's circulating around from federal agencies and lenders look at aquaponics because it marries climatology, it marries agriculture, it marries marine science, it marries freshwater riparian systems, and there's just so many levels to it that I'm thinking that the future is something that includes aquaponics on the front stage, regardless if it's really big right now. It just seems like the rest of the world's kind of looking at these types of growing systems as the future.
Absolutely, and I hope that when you do expand, that you will let us know so that we can share a possible employment opportunity with our students who are going to be the best
Yeah, CTAHR is the
candidates,
best.
right? So
Yeah, CTAHR students are the best, and we got to keep it that way. So I love, this is an alumni event, so I love the fact that you've been able to get a lot of alumni to participate on these kinds of things, but also to have a platform to share CTAHR's opportunities. And a lot of it's through the CTAHR network. You guys don't just stumble upon these opportunities. It's people like myself that reach out and have employment opportunities or internship opportunities, which of course lead to employment. And not even just employment, but training. So when I spoke to the incoming CTAHR class in MBB, I made sure to talk about, if there's one point of advice for the students is to get involved in the industry and to really be hands-on, because theoretical training in class is one thing, and you got to understand the principles, but the people that are getting hired right off the bat are the ones that can do things by hand. So working knowledge is huge, and that's something that I'm personally working on, is providing opportunities. So with Kualoa, that was it was an easier platform for me to access students. So we have an internship program right now. We have 4 Kalaheo students that have been with us now for a full year. They come every week. The aquaponics system, they're doing a trial between aquaponic grown lettuce versus in-ground lettuce, and they started the same varieties in both systems. And right now, aquaponics is winning. It's like twice as big at the same time point right now. So it's exciting for them to see that the advantages there. But we're going to start working with Kailua High School, and we might be doing live feeds, phytoplankton culture to feed an oyster project with the Polynesian Voyaging Society. And that's a NOAA grant that they're working on. So including high school students in the training, but with a focus with particular projects that they can walk away with skills that mean something. And then beyond that, we're looking at working with Kahuku and Castle, of course, Windward Public Schools. And with COVID, it's a little limited, but we're still making it happen. And I think that that's, the future for aquaculture and aquaponics. The industry actually has been pretty silent, and there's not a lot of money until literally President Trump came into the hot seat. So even if I don't like him, or somebody doesn't like him for some of the things he does on that political level, one of the obvious things is that he's put a lot of money into the industry. So there's a surge right now, and UH is a recipient of a lot of these through Sea Grant, and it's going to start trickling down this year. So there's a lot of building upon projects in Hawaii, and all focus on food production in these types of systems.
Well, that is awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Anthony. And I hope everybody enjoyed themselves tonight. I put a link to an evaluation form in the chat, so I hope you got a chance to fill that out. And I will be sending out a link in probably about a week with the recording of this. And then I'll try to get that your manual from you and send that out as well, if that would be okay.
Yeah, for sure. I think the manual will be the thing that helps the most, not listening to me right now, but trying to spend time on your
All righty. Well, thank you so much, and take care and have a very, very happy holiday.
Yeah, you guys too. Take care. Ahui ho.
Thank you.